Hello again, welcome to yet another devlog of my CityBuilder game set in a fantasy world without magic, where you will be leading a nation instead of just building a city. In the previous video I've added an economy, given some life to the NPCs and replaced the capsule model with an actual model for the NPC. While in this video I will improve terrain generation of the game while also adding some new features, like territories the player controls and builds on, which you can somewhat see in the background footage. There's this one thing that's been bugging me for a while now. It's that the terrain generates to the side. So every time you start the game you are looking at the ocean. I've decided to change that by making the terrain generate around the center of the world and not to the side. You may have also noticed that the map now lacks foliage. That's because I have two identical scripts, one for generating bushes and the other for generating trees. And I've just decided to combine them because having two pretty much same scripts is a bit redundant. That also makes my job a bit easier because now I can more easily fix bugs and also add new things the script can generate on the terrain. And now we are back to where we were, just with a centered world. After all that, I decided to add a LOD system to the terrain so the game can handle bigger terrain sizes while being optimized. And now it's time to make the map much bigger. Currently it's 15 by 15, but that's a bit small for what I imagined the game to be. So I first tested 25 by 25 and it worked fine. So I decided to once again go by 10 to 35 by 35, which I finally settled on. I'm not the biggest fan of the shape of the terrain, as I don't find it that good looking. That's why I've added a few more fall-off maps with pearly noise to the terrain, which greatly improved the shape of the terrain. Now I've decided to do some optimization on the terrain system. Previously the game generated all chunks even if the player couldn't see them because they were underwater. Now the game doesn't do that, and this has slightly made the FPS a bit better. I've also decided to change the rendering API from the built-in one to URP, or Universal Render Pipeline, just to try and use the GPU resident drawer to see how much this would affect the FPS. Here are the results. And the last thing I decided to add for the terrain generator is two new tree models, birch and poplar. The game now features a bit more variety and it looks a bit more colorful. And now some political gameplay, as this game is supposed to be a nation builder after all. And to do that, I've decided to add territories to the game. And by added I mean that I just made the chunks be provinces the player can own. I did that by making a class that holds information about the chunk, like the owner, ID, color, etc. The borders of your nation will look blocky, but they will do their job. And now I've decided to rework the camera a bit to make it better. First thing I did is that I locked the mouse and made it invisible when you are rotating the camera, so you can now rotate for as long as you want. As you can see in the background footage, I also made the game zoom out and in a lot more than before. The next step to tackle is making this zooming in and out a lot more smooth than it currently is. That is exactly what I did next. I've also kept the amount of zooming in and out you can do. Also, when you zoom out enough, you enter the political mode, where you can see a lot more of the map. Now let's get back to the territories. First, I've made the game hide trees when you are in the political mode. I did that by making the camera not render objects that are on the foliage layer. And after that I made the game show territories you own only when you are in the political mode, and the unclaimed territories are white. After all that, I made the game show your country's name over the territories you own. And since you cannot name your country or change the color, that's the next thing I've tackled. Now you can use any country name you want, and you can also choose a color out of these 5 presets. After that, I've decided to somewhat limit the number of territories the player can take, by adding an influence feature to the game. Influence is a resource you gain according to the amount of citizens and territories you have. The more of both you have, the more influence you will gain, and you have to have both of those to gain it. Currently, the only way to spend influence is to take over territories. Every time you take over a territory, you lose 200 influence. Since I want the player to start with 0 influence, the player couldn't take territories because they wouldn't have enough influence to do so. To fix that, I've given the player 16 free territories they can take over at the beginning of the game. The last thing I did was I added a UI button that activates the political mode automatically and allows you to choose territories to take over. And I've also made it impossible to take territories that don't border your current territories. That would be all from this devlog. Thank you for watching and see you in the next one.